It's now my great pleasure to introduce to you Larisa Didkovskaya, who is going to give our first presentation this morning. Larisa is the president of the Ukrainian Association of Gestalt Therapy. She is a candidate of the Psychological Sciences, associate professor in the Department of Practical Psychology at the University of Lviv. She's a highly respected figure. She's known for her sense of balance, her benevolence, and her diplomatic skills. And this morning, she is going to speak on dynamics of contact with war from the perspective of Gestalt therapy. Welcome, Larisa. We look forward to what you have to say to us.
My camera, everything's working, everything's good. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you to all organizers. Thank you to all members of our team. Thank you to those who have joined, that this symposium was possible and that we could share our experience, our knowledge, to share what we have learned in very fast terms, in very unexpectedly, but in a very effective way in connection with this attack of Russian Federation on Ukraine. I have a favorite proverb. I always use it. It's old Ethiopian proverb, which says, if you want to move fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. But I just am absolutely sure that we can go as far on the way of our victory, the way of our solidarity with forces of kindness, civilization, fairness, because we are going together with others. We are moving together with the EAP. We are moving together with all our foreign colleagues. We are moving with all those countries which are helping my country fight with this evil enemy, this darkness, this invader of past, of totalitarianism, of dictatorship, and we will be able to have victory of real human values. We will have real democracy and independence. And it's a great honor for me to talk about how my colleagues contribute to this way of victory, how Gestalt therapists contribute. I hope that I already can share my screen. So here we have two parts. One is in Ukrainian, one is in English, and we have dynamics of contact with war from the perspective of Gestalt therapy. So this is something our cooperation with war started with. This is what we had to come through. Me, my colleagues, all our Ukrainian people, and basically the whole world, through our experiences through our emotional experience of what was our stages and contact with military events, stress, and fear, apathy, depressive feelings, grief, and the worrying about loss. This is this experience which is definitely needed when we experience this catastrophe that we unfortunately have to cooperate with, aggression, invasion that has actually not been caused by our country or by our people. So here you see the data that show what has happened from the beginning of the war. This is data from April 2022. So this is a statistical data that were a result of social survey of Ukrainians, right after, let's say, not full 2 months after the beginning of full-fledged invasion. And here is the answer that was statistically right. We had 1,200 respondents about which exact emotional state and how the war affected the mental state of Ukrainians. Next slide, please. So we see that it was very tense emotional state. The highest indicators are there. And it is, of course, obvious that now one more statistical fact, and right after the war, another survey also from April 2022, index of psychological or emotional exhaustion, and we have high level, 71%. It is what specialists have to deal with. It is what the very citizens of Ukraine have to deal with. People who who live through something that they didn't plan to live through. Next slide, please. So now, why it is like this? What war is doing with us? Which changes do we have to assimilate, to live through, to experience by everybody who has to deal with that? War polarizes the world. It polarizes the world, and we have good and evil. It polarizes word for our and strange, us, them, my citizens, my comrades, and my enemies. And this polarization is absolutely inevitable, not because we are splitting this world, but because it is being splitted through the experience of this military invasion in our land. And in this polarization, it is pretty difficult to maintain integrated stability, healthy stability, because it is our safety. Because at war, there is only somebody who is like I am, and he's safe for me, he is supporting for me, he's understandable for me, and somebody who is not as I am, somebody who is my enemy. The third option, which is also possible, it is actually the traitor. The traitor who moved from my side to that side, or from that side to my side. Thank you. Next slide, please. And that's why, how can we resist this dissociation? How can we, with our knowledge, with our experience, be somebody who can help others and help ourselves in particular to stay on this integration middle? So what is resource of integration, a professional integration of psychotherapists? These are actually own professional identity. Why is it more important than conceptual differences, than difference of directions, difference of techniques and some approaches? Because we are all joined by one profession, one work. So we are all psychotherapists, and this integrity of different psychotherapeutic directions and conceptual schools and different educational institutions become less important and less meaningful. And the only possible integration is this generalized identity. It is when I, a psychotherapist, and our symposium is actually this illustration. EAP, we have representatives of different countries, different schools, but whether does it matter all of our conceptual differences? Do they matter now? No. What is more important for us? What helps us all to be together? Our professional identity. Tolerance for the otherness of others. Yes, we are all unique. Yes, we know that on the planet there are 8 billion of unique people, but we still have our different characteristic, and it's called universality, because each of us is, yes, unique, but we do not have, for example, a manual, psychology of Patricia, or psychology of Larisa, or psychology of Sasha. We have psychology of a human. So that's why the previous slide, please. Martinez, the previous slide, please. Thank you. Thanks a
Ось ця
lot.
наша
And
толерантність до
this,
іншості
our
іншого
tolerance for the otherness
допомагає
of others, help
втриматися
us to
і запобігти
hold,
дисоціативному
to
щепленню. В
resist this
Олександрії
dissociative
спостерігаємо
splitting.
римський лозунг
We
«Розділяй і
remember this
володай».
old Rome motto,
І це
share
лозунг,
and
який
lead.
допомагав
And
перемогти
this is something that helped them to
ворогів
win.
всередині системи, і ти
Uh,
прийдеш на
if you have enemies
результат.
inside your
Тобі
system,
не
then you
доведеться
will have
робити
the
того
result.
самого.
You will not be
Ось
able
наша
to do
численна
anything on
фронтова
your own.
задача
So that's why
не
our
розділяти,
professional
щоб не
task is
було
not to
можливості
share,
владарювати
not
нашим
to
народом.
split. So
Тому
our enemies
толерантність
do
до
not have the
іншості іншого – це,
possibility to
власне,
lead.
ресурс,
So that's why
який
this
здатний
tolerance for the
зберегти
otherness is this
установи
resource of
обов'язкового військового
healthy
розчарування.
integration in
Спільна
the
мета.
conditions
Так,
of this
кожен з виступаючих
military
говорить про щось про
fleeting,
спільну мету.
common goal. Of course, we're
Наша
all
спільна
talking
мета –
about common
перемога.
goal. Our common
Перемога
goal is victory.
гуманізму, перемога
Victory of
толерантності,
humanism, victory
перемога
of morality,
цивілізованих
victory
цінностей
of
і
civilized
перемога
values,
того, що
victory
означає
of
перемога добра
something
над злом.
that
Всі
defines
зусилля не лише України,
the victory of
власне, на
evil
це скеровані.
um,
І
of
певним
victory
чином
of good
Китай
over evil,
допомагає
and we are trying to
протистояти
achieve that. And
розчаруванню.
one more
Це
factor that helps
інтеграція
us
зі світом. Те,
is
що говорить, що
integration with the
хочеш
world. That's what I
зайти
have started
далеко,
with. If
йди
you
з
want
іншими.
to move far, you
І
need to
ця
move with others.
інтеграція
And this
якраз тут
integration
допомагає
is
Україні
really
і
great for Ukraine.
ізоляція
It
від
helps
світу – це
Ukraine,
то,
and its isolation
що
and
стосується
isolation
ворога.
from the world is what? This
Скільки
is something that relates to the
компаній,
enemy, because
асоціацій,
lots of
будь-яких
companies, lots of
спільнот визначили зі
associations, lots
своїх
of
рядів
communities excluded
країну-агресора і її працівників з
country,
будь-якої галузі
aggressor
і
country,
будь-якого
and
фонду.
their employees
Дякую. Наступний
from
слайд.
any kind of sphere. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Ось тут швиденько, це
So
оскільки
here,
тема про
just
гештальт,
in a
це
very
центр
fast way, we are talking about Gestalt.
інституції
So
гештальт
here we have
психотерапевтичних
those
навчаючих
Gestalt therapy
різних інститутів,
institutions,
які є на
different
Україні, і які
institutions that
абсолютно
exist in
очевидно
Ukraine and which
працюють зараз над
obviously
наданням
have been
психологічної
working
допомоги
on
населенню
providing
від самого
psychological
початку
assistance for
дотепер,
the
доки
population
не
from the
було.
very beginning code up till now. The next slide, please.
Так, тепер ось та динаміка
And now the
опису
dynamics of engagement,
наших переживань,
of
наших
our
етапів
experience, our
проживання війни
stages
в
of
термінах
war
переживання стресу.
experience,
Всі ми, як фахівці,
in
знаємо ці
terms of
етапи
stages of
і
stress
будемо
experience. We all
показати,
know
на
those
прикладах
stages as
показувати, як це
specialists, but I
проживалося
will
нами і
show
нашими
examples
воїнами.
how we managed to live through
Стадія
that.
тривоги і страху,
Stage of
демобілізація,
anxiety and fear,
протистояння,
stage of
резильєнтність
mobilization
і
and resistance to
демобілізація або
stressors, and stage of
гансельєр.
demobilization and exhaustion.
Пам'ятаємо всі страждання
Gancellier, we all
стресу. Дякую.
remember,
Наступний
stress
слайд.
without distress. Thank you. Next slide.
Ось ця перша стадія.
Here we
Як
have
це
this
стосувалося
first
нас і
stage,
наших клієнтів.
how it related
Цю
us and
стадію
our
основною
clients. In
фігурою
this stage,
теорії
the
гештальт-підходу був страх.
main figure was
Страх,
the
який
main
абсолютно
predominant figure was
рефлектований і
fear.
абсолютно
Fear that
закономірний,
is very
неочікуваний напад
absolutely
і неочікувана
understandable. We had
інтервенція,
unexpected
повне відчуття
intervention,
тривоги і
unexpected
страху, а
attack, and
першого
this
етапу за
feel
авансом це
of
є або
anxiety or fear as the
поняття
first
«і»
stage,
за
or as an
гештальт-підходом.
it
Характерні
understanding if we
особливості
use a
цієї
Gestalt
стадії,
approach.
так,
Characteristics of this stage,
розгубленість,
it's when people are
хаос,
absolutely helpless, they don't know
втрата
what to do,
орієнтирів
it's
і
chaos, it's loss
крайня
of some
гірше
kind of
групування і
understanding,
консолідація,
and grouping
де
and
розброєння
consolidation
двох
of
стає
people.
вдвічі меншою.
If you
Радість
share
поділена на
the
двох
something that
стає
is bad for
вдвічі
two
більшою.
people, it
Чи
becomes less. But if you share
розмножити
happiness,
так.
it becomes
І
only more
ось
of that happiness if you share it
обов'язковий
with somebody else,
рефлекторний
as
інстинкт оцього
says Ukrainian
групування
old proverb. So this
або
reflexive
феномену
instinct
групового
of
зараження, або соціальної
consolidation or this
індукції. Це те, що
grouping or
спостерігалося,
the social
власне,
induction,
на
this is
стадії
something that
тривоги і
we
страху.
have observed at the beginning, at
Величезна
the stage
кількість,
of
мільйони людей
fear and anxiety. Lots of
переїздили з
people,
місця
millions of
небезпеки в
people
місце безпеки, з
moved to
регіону Східної України в регіони Західної України.
unsafe
Величезна
places
кількість
to safe places
утисків,
from east to Ukraine
допомоги,
to west Ukraine, lots of
тимчасове
shelters,
переміщення
lots of
осіб через
shelters for
кордон на
IDPs.
захід. Це
They were
продовження
moving,
ось
lots of
цієї
IDPs
стадії
were moving
тривоги і страху.
from
Дякую.
through the
Наступний слайд.
border. Next slide, please.
Прошу, я мушу швидше це робити, щоб
Yes,
встигнути.
and I have to to make it a little
Наступне,
faster to
дякую. Це якраз наші фотографії. Ми
actually
спостерігаємо,
feel our
ось
time
це
framework.
є
So this is picture
залізниця
from
Івано-Франківська,
Lviv. This is
яка
our railway
проходить і яка
station, and
до
lots of
нього
people
потрапила. Ось
who managed to get there. This is any kind of enterprise where we were making those mask nets. Here we have volunteers. They were on duty on railway stations and all other places to help others to deal with their anxiety and their fear. Thank you. Next slide. This is that eat function I was mentioning before. Instincts, emotions, everything that is associated with the behavior, the stage of fear and anxiety, or as we say, eat. This is that physiological resources, those vital resources that help find energy for survival. So in terms of Gestalt approach, the first stage of what we were living through, that was survival. The next slide, please. So how did we help at that stage of anxiety and fear? Here we have lots of supervision and intervention groups for psychologists and psychotherapists. Now I will only name numbers. For the first half a year, our Gestalt therapeutic group for those who needed assistance visited every day at 12 in Zoom, every day for first half a year. This is 170 groups. Together with that, 3 times per week, first month of the war, we had our therapeutic groups conducted by UUP for all directions of Ukraine. In parallel, foreign specialists, our colleagues, our friends provided such help for us in any way possible. Online, they were coming to us, they were providing free lectures, workshops, and it also was this obligatory help for this fear to become less, to reduce this anxiety. Thank you. Next slide, please. This is what I have been talking right now. Every day, weeks, 3 times a week groups for all modalities. Thank you. Next slide. And the next stage, we mentioned at the beginning, a stage of mobilization or resistance to stressors. What are we talking about here? Yes, we know about this psychologically famous term, adaptation to irritation. Oh, yes, we have adapted during this time to this level of psycho-emotional stress, this feeling of permanent threat, of helplessness to organize protection of our own safety or safety of our near and dear. And we slowly learned how to do that. So at this stage, we from that feared, chaotic, very reflexive activity moved to that place where our activity has become more conscious and more effective. Thank you. Next slide, please. And this mobilization or resistance created actually this main figure of this stage, action. But this action was already not reflexive, not impulsive, but personalized. And each person made their own decision which was named place of the biggest effectiveness during the war. The militaries have their place of maximum effectiveness. They protect our land on the front lines. They help fighting with enemies. Psychotherapists, psychologists have place for their own effectiveness. They help those who are in need. They provide psychological support. Also, Perugov, a very famous surgeon in the world, he was very progressive for this time. He called war traumatic epidemic. This is when traumas are multiplied, and this traumatic epidemic was not only about trauma, body traumas, it also about spirit traumas, mental traumas. So that's why each of us has been dealing with this epidemic in their own way. So this personality function meant who am I? This question that was asked already consciously when this chaos and fear stage was behind and they were already in the stage of action. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Як проявляється ця функція? Як ця дія
How
була
is this function
мотивована нашими
expressed? How this
особистісними
activity
виборами,
was
нашими
filtered by our
особистісними соціальними
personalized
ролями?
choices and
Кожен з
social
нас має
roles?
свій досвід, кожен
Each
з
of
нас має
us has
свій
their own
рівень знань,
experience,
свій
their
рівень
own
своєї
level of
компетентності, і
knowledge,
ми
of competence,
вчилися
and
знаходити
we
змогу
learned
висловлювати
again
думку.
and again
Називалася ця
to
стадія, дякую,
learn
наступний
something
слайд,
new. Next
дивлюся на час,
slide, please.
встигну.
I try to fit
Називалася
in
ця
our time
стадія
framework. So this
проживання.
stage was
І якщо
called
вперше було
living through
проживання,
or
пам'ятаєте від
experience. So in the
спочатку
first one
функцію
was
ід,
survival. You
то тепер
remember
це
this function id at the
проживання.
beginning,
Ми,
and now it was
кожен в свій
living.
спосіб,
We
застосовуючи
all
свої особистісні
using
ресурси,
our own
застосовуючи свої
personality
знання,
resources, using our
доживати,
own
вчилися
knowledge,
проживати те, з
learned
чим нам
to
доводиться
live
мати справу.
through what we
І
have to
ось
deal
у
with.
кожного цей фронт. Маємо
So
власний
every has
досвід,
their own front.
маємо
We
нові
have
знання,
our own
маємо нові
experience, we have
навички,
new knowledge, we have
маємо
new skills, we
найважливіше
have the most
драматичне
important
зростання. Так і
traumatized
тому кожен, я
growth.
вже казала, на
And
місці
that's
своєму,
why, as I have
максимальної
mentioned, every
ефективності в цій
person
війні.
has a place of
Дякую,
their own
наступний слайд.
effectiveness during this war. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Вже до того часу
And
зайняв його абсолютно
this
свідомо.
person has already occupied this
Тепер
place absolutely
переходимо до
consciously.
власної стадії ось
Now
цього
we are moving to the
травматичного
stage
зростання.
of this traumatized
Ще до
growth.
24
Yes,
лютого 22 року
before
жоден з
21st of
нас не
February
зміг на це
2022,
стати.
none of us
Ще до
knew that
24
we are
лютого
able to do
22
that.
року жоден з
Before
нас не мав
21st February 2022, none of
навичок,
us
такого
had such
досвіду і
skills,
таких
such
знань.
experience, and
Але
such
тепер ми
knowledge.
це
But
маємо.
now
Тепер ми
we
про це
all have it.
знаємо. І ці
Now we know
процеси
about that.
відбуваються
And those
за
processes,
законами
they
квантової
take
фізики. Дуже
place
швидко, дуже
based on
динамічно
the
і дуже
laws of
ефективно
quantum
насправді.
physics in a very
Дякую.
fast and
Наступний слайд.
effective way. Thank you. Next slide, please.
І ось те, що
And
за
this is what,
Гансом Сельє або за етапами
uh,
стресу
if
означає
to talk
стадію
about
виснаження або стадію
stages, yes, it's
демобілізації.
a stage of
І хочу
demobilization, a stage of
сказати, що прямо
exhaustion.
зараз, коли
And I would like to
тривають
say that
процеси
right now, when
у
I'm
світі,
reading this lecture,
є
we
сирена, і
have
всі мої
air
земляки
alarm
отримали повідомлення про те, що
now, and we
нам
all
треба
citizens of Ukraine got
рухатися. І
message
якщо
that we
перші,
have
це
to
прекрасна
go in,
ілюстрація,
go
тому
to
що це перші
shelters, and
дні.
that's a
Не
great
обов'язково
illustration
легли
because during the
і
first day we actually
прості
were
і
running
прості,
to those
необхідними,
shelters
щоб пережити цю
which
тривожну
were
стану.
needed for us to
Зараз
live
кожен з
through
нас
this
має
fear and
місце
anxiety. Now
безпеки, кожен з
each
нас
of us
має
has
іти
this
таке
place of
місце, такий
safety,
простір,
let's say,
наприклад, теж де я
place or
кажу є,
space
де
where
є
I'm sitting, for
вертикальна
example, right
стіна,
now,
де
where
є
we have
таке
this
пряме
main wall
е,
and
вікно
where
прямо
we
за
have
плечима. І
where we
це
do not have
приклад
window
того,
right
як ми
behind your
навчилися без
back.
особистої
And this
небезпеки,
is the
яка
examples
спочатку
how we
здавалася
managed
абсолютно
to
фатальною.
deal with this
Тепер
threat, with this
йдемо до
danger
процесу
that seemed
кровотворення.
fatal at the beginning. Now
Основна
about
фігура
demobilization
цієї
and about
стадії вибір.
exhaustion. The main
Вибір
figure
пріоритетів,
here
які
is
організують
choice of
збереження енергії
priorities
і
that can
навчить
organize
витрачати її
saving of energy
правильно
and
і
something that
ефективно.
will
Дякую.
learn how to
Наступний слайд.
spend this energy in a correct and effective way. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Так, ось що допомагає нам зараз. Це
So what is
травматичне
helping us
зростання.
right now is
Допомагає
this
нам
traumatic growth.
вибирати,
So it
що
helps us to
вважати, як
choose
діяти,
what,
як вирішувати.
how do we have to act,
Допомагає
which
нам
decisions do we have to make. It
навчитися
helps us
зберігати
to
свою
learn to
безпеку
preserve
за рахунок
our
емоційного
safety
дистанціювання, за
because of
рахунок
our emotional
фізичного
distance,
дистанціювання від
about physical
ситуації, які є
distancing from the
небезпечними для нас з
situation,
вами. І
from this
найважливіше, ця
detachment
функція
from something
включає
which is
всі
threatening for
свідомі
us.
вибори
And
людини
this function
і
also means
можливість
conscious
нести за
choices
них
made by a person
відповідальність,
and the possibility
визначаючи
to be
свої власні
responsible for
правила.
them,
Дякую. Наступний
determining
слайд.
our own behaviors. Thank you. Next slide, please.
І ось це приклад, як
And
змінилася
here we have
енергія
the
доступу. Це
example how
фотографічний гру, і як
our
змінилася форма нашої супроводу.
frequency of
Ті групи,
meetings
які
changed and
досі
forms of
були
such
щоденними, тепер
work.
проводяться
Those
один
groups
раз на
which were
тиждень.
every day now
Ті групи, які
conducted
були
once per
тричі на
week.
тиждень,
Those
тепер
groups which were
проводяться раз
3
на
times per
місяць.
week now are conducted once
Ті
per month.
активності, які ми
Those
повинні
activities
проводити,
which we
навчальні чи
have
будь-які
to
інші мирні
conduct,
активності, відбуваються
learning,
згідно з
any
планом,
other peaceful activities
відбуваються
are
згідно
taking
наших
place in
домовленостей.
accordance
І
to
це про
our
те,
schedule, to
що
our
цей
agreements.
ресурс
And this is about the fact that this
травматичного зростання
resource of
збільшення
traumatized growth,
відповідальності за свій вибір і
this
спільної
increase
підтримки має
of
вплив
responsibility for our choice that we have right now. This when we have this new experience of living and living during the war. It gives us the possibility to do what we have to do, but already in a more conscious, more balanced way. Next slide, please. And now, very fast, I'm not going to read all of that. You can see that about the importance of psychotherapeutic contact in the conditions of war, about how, well, maybe I will actually read this in a very fast way. How valuable is our relations with our clients, with foreign colleagues, especially I would like to say, because during previous slide I didn't emphasize on that, we have every week a meeting with our Irish Gestalt therapists. They every day during 1 year they meet our Gestalt therapists just because of their own will for free. We are really grateful to them for that. That's about the importance of psychotherapeutic contact. Why is it so important? Why is it so needed? What it gives us and our clients? The opportunity to share our feelings with another person. I have already mentioned that if you share your grief, then it becomes twice less. The opportunity to receive sympathy, support, and empathy. Why? Because it is the deficit. Resources of relatively stable contact in conditions of uncertainty. This is actually everything turned upside down. Everything is ruined. Everything is devastated. And our psychotherapeutic contact can be conditionally stable in the conditions of this chaos. The possibility of reflection of one's feeling, understanding, the possibility to analyze and synthesize what is happening with me and with others, the possibility of experiencing a climate of security with all its conditions, traumatic growth, that's what I have mentioned about for therapists and for clients. And the most important thing, the possibility of applying this experience in other contexts, in other relationships for clients and with their families, with their friends, with their colleagues. This is spreading, this sharing. And if Porokhov has mentioned that as an epidemic, then psychotherapy is an epidemic of psychotherapeutic resource, and it's spreading. Thank you to my foreign colleagues. Please, next slide. Thank you, everybody, for that we are able to be part of this sharing of this resource, of this sharing of psychotherapeutic resource for our country and for the whole world.
My dear Larisa, thank you so very much. I think that was a perfect opening presentation, and you had to struggle with some technical difficulties, but thank you for everything that you have presented to us, because you've set the framework for what are the different stages that we all go through in times of war, and what is the role that psychotherapy and psychotherapists can play in those different stages of the development of war. Thank you for your presentation to us. I think it's a perfect start for us today. Thank you so much.